Next tonight, Charlene Hunter-Gault has a conversation with some of the newest and hottest filmmakers on the scene. They're young, they're black, but they're making green.
It's been the season of what's being called New Jack Cinema, movies by black filmmakers exploring modern urban street life with a vengeance, and with great success. The images span the spectrum, from the violent life of a drug lord in Mario Van Peebles' New Jack City, to interracial love and family conflicts explored by Spike Lee in Jungle Fever. They also include coming-of-age films, turned out by movie makers just coming of age themselves. Coming of age in South Central. The films and the filmmakers are being seen almost everywhere, with the promise of more to come. 19 films will be directed by blacks this year, more than were released commercially in all of the 80s. Not since the 1970s have audiences been exposed to so many black faces in front of and behind the cameras. In 1971, Melvin Van Peebles opened the door, or kicked it in, with Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song. Although highly criticized for its violence and strong sexual themes, Sweetback was a big box office success. Movies like Shaft and Superfly and many others followed. Producer William Greaves said blacks wanted to make other kinds of films about blacks, but
these films were the only kinds of movies that one could get financing for. They pandered to the most base kinds of preoccupations of the population in order to simply make a profit, when they could have made a profit just as easily giving a much more total picture, than they did. But it was largely as a result of ignorance, I think, and a mixture of ignorance, racism, and a lack of understanding of, the needs and interests of the African-American people and the people of America as a whole.
You give me fever.
There's still sex. And there's still violence. But along with the same old sex and violence are some different messages.
This whole drug thing, it's not a black thing, it's not a white thing, it's a death thing.
And these different messages are making some different money. Spike Lee's Jungle Fever has raked in about $20 million since June, and New Jack City has grossed some $47 million since its release in March. Michael Lynn is president of New Line Cinema, a movie production company that specializes in distributing small, independent films. He's had two big successes in the New Jack mode. House Party, a comedy about young middle-class blacks, which earned New Line more than $26 million, 10 times more than what it cost to make, and Hanging with the Homeboys, another comedy which grossed over $9 million in just the first weekend of its release.
I think it took a certain amount of time for the professionals in the business to acknowledge that there was an audience for this, for product dealing with this background, this kind of story to tell. And until that really was identified, it was very difficult for the people in the business to commit the kind of wherewithal that was necessary.
Let's face it, the African American community represents demographically, while it's 12% or 13% of the total population of this country. In point of fact, there are various statistics that say that we, go to the movies 25 to 30 to 40%. In some cities, we represent 40% of the viewing, audiences. As a matter of fact, the 50 major markets in the United States are largely, I would say, over 50% made up of people of color, that is the African American, Latinos, Asians, and so on. So that those numbers are very, very significant, actually.
Whether this current success means that Hollywood and black filmmakers have turned a corner is still an open question. Not too long ago, many of those who are now making the big bucks were passing the hat, albeit creatively, to finish their projects.
19-year-old Matty Rich ran out of money making his feature straight out of Brooklyn, but he appealed for funds on a New York radio program, and that got him through. And some of them, especially black women who have yet to get a foot in the door, are still at it, like Darisha Kai, an award-winning director who recently held a fundraiser at a New York club to raise money to complete her film, Land Where My Fathers Died.
You know, desperate things call for desperate measures. I have everything done on the film except the negative. It has to be cut and it has to be, finished at the lab. So, I mean, I'm so close. All I need is the money.
The money, the fame, the attention are some of the things we talked about with a group of the young filmmakers recently in Hollywood. What do you make of all that, and what do you think of it? How do you feel about it?
Well, I think the attention probably comes from the fact that Hollywood itself is an exhausted industry. They've run out of stories, which is why they rely upon remakes, sequels, and even comic books. And I think that what we represent as a generation of filmmakers are people with new voices and new visions. And people, of course, if you're going to spend $7.50, you want to be entertained and informed in a way that's engaging. So I think if America's going to have worthwhile evenings at the movies, they got to come see our movies.
Why now, and why you guys?
I think it's just a unique set of circumstances. First of all,
What you want to send?
I think every filmmaker that I know of, certainly I know everyone on this panel, went into film because they had a sense of social responsibility. Mm-hmm. And in a country where the president is elected on television, knowing that controlling images is crucial to how we define ourselves. Everyone I know thinks about that, thinks about social responsibility. As you said, that the idea of entertainment, edutainment. And at the same time, we want to have fun. We also have artistic goals, as filmmakers, because we're all students of the entire world of film, whether it's...
Are you making enough money, and do you have enough power to have a critical mass to make a difference?
In terms of box office, I think Boyz in the Hood is really doing well. Last year, 1990, Housewife set a measure. Immediately, Meryl came out in February of this year, shattered it. Then Spike in June shatters it. And then John in July shatters it. That's wonderful. And I think that gives us, to go back to the sports analogy, it's a relay race. Okay. Each person is given a baton. So when I go in and argue for a bigger budget for our next project, I can point to John and say, listen, Boyz in the Hood made all this money. Have confidence in risking more money on my budget.
Are any of you making the decisions?
No.
Neema, what's your perspective on all of this? Because black women have not gotten to the door the same.
No, we have not.
Yet.
I think
it's about to happen in a couple cases.
I think that the African American woman's story is yet to be told. I think that with the breakthrough of such phenomenal filmmakers, let's just look at Uzan Palsy for a minute. Mm-hmm. Her Sugarcane Alley was a classic. I mean, First Time Out was just a fabulous film. Dry White Season was the first film about South Africa made from an African point of view. A black point of view, okay? Julie Dash, who has a fabulous film out called Daughters of the Dusk, about black women at the turn of the century in the South Carolina islands, which won, I think, Best Cinematography Award at Sundance, right. Cannot find a distributor, okay, for her film. It's completed.
Have you reached the point, given your success, that you can make films without being concerned about whether or not they will be palatable?
Steven Spielberg can't do that. All filmmakers go through that. I mean, you have to think about exactly who your audience is and who's going to see the film first and foremost.
Mm-hmm. There's also a presumption, and I think as a movement, black filmmakers represent cheap labor.
That's right.
All these movies have done for relatively low budgets.
Exactly. At least half the budgets or even a quarter of the budgets of any normal feature.
As a result, it's very low risk, and in a case like New Jack and Boyz in the Hood, big return.
So where does that take us then?
See, that's the key. In the second film, my next film has no crack, no guns, no knives. And that's going to be the key when we get off into those other areas.
Is that going to sell?
What we're going to do. It's going to be very interesting. Also, but the studios keep telling me, well, I got a great idea, Mario. New Jack City 2.
This is a question unrelated almost to any of that. Warrington, who were some of the people whom you respected and who influenced your work?
As filmmakers? Mm-hmm. To my mind, Akira Kurosawa is the greatest filmmaker ever. And he's the man.
With that program.
What about you, John?
Well, there's a lot of people that influenced me, but primarily, I mean, person that really gave me strength and got me through school as an inspiration was Spike, because I met Spike when I was just starting film school, about 2 or 3 weeks before I even started film school itself.
Did you watch movies as a kid? And did you have
I watched
any?
a lot of films as a kid. My father used to take me to movies every weekend. That was the recreational thing for us.
What directors or?
It's people like Steven Spielberg, Coppola, Martin Scorsese and stuff. I went through a period in which I used to like to go to like a lot of high concept stuff, and then I started exploring stuff that was made in the late '60s and the '70s, right? Films like Mean Streets and Taxi Driver.
Neema?
Well, someone like Shirley Clark, who did The Cool World. I mean, when I saw The Cool World, it blew me away. And then somebody told me, a black woman directed that. I said, you got to be joking, That was very inspirational for me. And people like Gordon Parks Sr. And Bill Greaves, independent filmmakers. Kurosawa, I got into Kurosawa. Truffaut, yes, once I decided I want to cross from theater to film. But only partially because a lot of the white filmmakers and story structure and everything I find limiting. I'm not so much protagonist, antagonist, direct story. I like more surreal elements, and black folks talk in a different kind of dialect. We have a different kind of rhythm.
And before you go to Mario, I grew up in East St. Louis, Illinois, which is a small black town, blackest city in America. And I didn't even take still photographs. I had no notion of being a filmmaker. And I experienced my first year in college. I was sitting in the movie theater, and this movie came on called Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song. And when I saw that movie, first thing that threw me off was that the credit said, starring the black community. I said, what kind of movie is this? As this film proceeded, it was a complete reworking of American content, form, etc. And it's that moment, in that darkened room in New Haven, Connecticut, that I said, oh, maybe I should do that. So I'm going to go back and add, before I learned about Kurosawa, it was Melvin Van Peebles who gave me the inspiration.
What about you, Mario?
Oh, my dad would shoot me if I didn't say Melvin. But what's interesting? I have a very unusual situation, because if you grow up in America and you're black and the white man has told you that God is white and Jesus is white and Santa Claus is white and the president is white, you can grow up a little deformed. I remember watching Bogart, digging Bogart, until the Black Butler came on. And then watching Gone with the Wind and saying, yeah, I could do that Dark Gable. And then the maid would come on and say, wow, And then seeing 3 white cowboys kill 100 red men, And seeing that Hollywood consistently played minorities in a certain way. When I went to Japan, first thing the Japanese said was, you didn't have to put an Asian boy in your movie, but you did. And he was a leading man. He did, the role wasn't big. And you had a woman who was a gangster. So one of my situation was I grew up with a black film director. So I never, as a boy growing up, seeing your dad be the boss, that's great. That's very healthy, because I didn't question certain things. And as such, I remember when my dad walked off the set of Watermelon Man and he said, I'm not going to do this movie. And they said, why? They had all this money invested. He said, because I'm lonely. I don't see any of my people here. And he broke the unions. The next day, these all-white unions had some black folks and some Puerto Ricans and some women, and they were literally trying to kill him. When we finished Sweetback, we had $13 left, the whole family.
There was a lot of publicity when Boyz in the Hood opened because of the violence that was at some of the theaters, and of course there have been a lot of explanations as to why that happened. How concerned are you that this kind of thing, as well as the publicity, is going to affect your movies? I mean, has that had an...
It really troubles me when that kind of spin is placed on a movie that is as important as Boyz in the Hood.
You mean the spin that it causes violence?
Exactly, because that's, first of all, it's just false, flatly stated it's false. And essentially, Boyz in the Hood is the solution, not the problem. And that if one watches that movie and thinks, it's very clear about the kind of cycle of despair and impotence that leads to that kind of insane violence, you would look at that movie and understand that's not the way to go.
But John, does that worry you, or do you feel that that's going to have an impact on your films, the fact that there was attendant violence?
Nope.
You went around to the theaters.
Yeah, the biggest thing happened in L.A., and it happened in L.A. because L.A. is a real small kind of like world unto itself. There's a whole population of young brothers that don't have no focus and don't have direction. You know, none of them have fathers, so they're all in the process of trying to prove their manhood. And I was up there that night when the shooting went off, and there were all these people from different neighborhoods coming in, and the security in the theater didn't know what to look for. You know, they didn't know if the person is all dressed down and has all the numbers of what gang he's from, you know, that this person shouldn't be in the theater in the first place. They didn't know that, so they just let all the people from different places come in. And like with Mario's film, when that came out, you know, people, they talk about, oh, well, violence erupted when New Jack City came out, but they forget that the LAPD lynched this brother named Rodney King the Sunday before the movie came out. So there was a whole preconceived psychology between these young brothers who were outside of theaters that have had $7.50 or $7 taken away from them, that they had to ask their mother or had to get off their jobs, taken away from them, and then they had the cops in front of them waving a baton, just like when they've seen all this week them beating people. So they, you know, it's like there's little elements people don't look at the bottom line at what causes certain things. They want to say the film did this. They don't want to say, well, let's look at the way society is going, you know, and try to deal with that.
Let me just deal with New Jack for a minute, because I got asked this question a lot, and it was interesting. Opening weekend, New Jack City, I go down to Westwood. All these folks came down. A lot of people bought tickets and could not get into the movie theater after they had bought tickets. So you had a lot of folks standing around. And that week they'd seen the Rodney King video. When the cops came down, someone said, let's get him for Rodney King. Now, that could happen in front of Mary Poppins. Mind you, there were 3 people that got shot in Godfather, am I correct?
That's right.
They got shot in Godfather. We had another case in Brooklyn. A guy went to see New Jack City who was in one gang, and somebody else in another gang was waiting for him across the street in a parking lot, and they got to shooting across the street. Now, the media attributed that to New Jack, but you see, the media, the white media, they look at the poster for New Jack, having never seen the movie. Now, once the movie opens and people see it, and they see it's an anti-drug film or with Boyz in the Hood, whatever, they see it. It's a whole different thing. And I asked this question in Britain, I said, because this British guy kept asking me that, I said, what about you guys in soccer matches? You go crazy over soccer.
Right.
Is there something about soccer that drives you nuts?
Why are you going to ban soccer?
Exactly.
What do you think the success of your movies and the experiences that you're having now says about America in 1991?
I have to echo what Mario says, that Hollywood is green and that it's good business to be in business with black filmmakers. I don't think it represents a liberalization of racial attitudes or new egalitarian spirit. I think it's a profitable investment.
What do you think, John?
I think, you know, there's a large population of people in this country, black and otherwise, that are always interested in what's going on with black folks. So, you know, we're going to be making films for a long time as long as we continue to make good films.
You agree with that, Neema?
I think that there's a fear to present women of color on the screen, the silver screen as well as television. And
why?
Well, Charlene, you don't really want me to.
Yeah.
Well, you know, just to be brief, very brief, I have a lot of reasons why, and I don't think we have time to go into them now. But I think that in terms of women create, you know, women go to the movies, obviously. You know, they spend a lot of money in movies. And I think that the absence, and I mean absence and invisibility of the African-American women and women of color in general on the silver screen as well as in television leaves something for everyone to definitely think about as to, everyone has their own opinion why, you know.
But give me one reason. Just briefly, because we really...
Well, I just think that, one reason is I think there's a fear of creating a balanced image between black men and black women on the screen, giving the black man a real woman to deal with, as we are real, who is supportive and gives a balanced sense of family, you know, which has been basically absent, you know, in everything. I think that there's a lack of understanding of what we really are to each other and the role that black women have played in society, and a fear of to stop looking at us as the mammies of America and the mammies of the world and begin to look at us as the queens and the contributors to society that we always have been.
What's so important when you look at the history of the image of blacks in motion pictures, and particularly when you consider that is, at least currently in 1991, America's principal export to the world. that is how blacks are defined. And that is how, not only to other people, but to ourselves. Reality is defined on a 40-foot screen written in light.
It's a mind-molding business, all of it. The radio, the TV, the major motion pictures, records, it's all mind-molding. So if we're involved in molding people's minds and changing society and using it as a political tool, because really, no matter how entertaining you claim it is a political tool. This is the final frontier, and we are trying to break it.
Mario, Neema, John, Reggie, and Warrington, thank you for joining us.